Adrian Wojnarowski joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show from Yahoo Sports. How are you, Adrian?
I'm great, Rich. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So what is the story coming into the NBA Finals tonight? I mean, there's so much talk that's going on to try and fill time between the end of the Western Conference Finals and tonight. But what do you think is the actual story going into tonight's game?
I mean, listen, when you think of the historic NBA Finals series, you usually remember them in the context of a star matchup. And you have that with Steph Curry and LeBron James, and they're as players, they're certainly very different. They're different as people, and Steph Curry kind of has taken something from LeBron here. He not only took the championship last year, but he's taken now back-to-back MVPs at a time when you thought LeBron's MVP run was going to keep going. So I think this is a tremendous matchup. I think obviously Cleveland comes in much stronger than they were last year. And they still got to 6 games against them because LeBron was so dominant in that series. And if LeBron plays like that again with the supporting cast he has now, they're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree with you. They don't have the length, obviously, up and down the roster like the Thunder had or have, depending on how things will play out on July 1st, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So what challenges do you think the Cavs, minus LeBron, and the way you just said that, can pose to the Warriors in a way that the Thunder did not?
Well, you're right about the length, and Oklahoma City sort of has outsized every position. They outsized the game of basketball, the size, and they gave Golden State a lot of trouble. I think that this this Cleveland team shoots the ball a lot better than it did a year ago. They have more depth at every position. Certainly they're healthier. Can Kevin Love stay on the floor in the fourth quarter defensively? Can they live with Love in crunch time in big games? That'll be interesting to see. And defending, I do wonder defensively with Cleveland, and you saw them have some significant lapses in that Toronto series that allowed Toronto to get to 6 games with them. They're going to have to be much tighter on defense against a Golden State team that has much more weaponry than Toronto does, more difficult players to stop. And there were times in that series where they just really struggled on that end of the floor. They're going to have to really ratchet it up against the Golden State team that has, at most times, puts 5 really good offensive players on the floor and 2 historically great ones at any time.
Adrian Wojnarowski from Yahoo Sports joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So our poll question today is simple, is essentially who do you think is going to win? Where do you go on this subject?
Well, I give a slight edge with home court to Golden State. You saw in the Oklahoma series just what an impact it had to have Game 7 at home. That's why when you win 73 games and you set a record and you have that advantage, I certainly give it to Golden State. But I think LeBron's on a mission. He's played really well. Certainly the last part of the year has been even more dominant. But I do think the home court is to me it may be that close of an edge. That you're splitting hairs possibly in the series, but coming on the road, Cleveland's got to get one here. Typically, when you look at and historically, that road team's got to get one of the first 2 on the road. It's really hard to play from behind against this Golden State team.
All right, let's talk Durant. Last time you and I spoke, you were of the mindset that it was more likely than not that Durant, after kicking the tires on free agency, would just re-sign with Oklahoma City for 1 year, perhaps to match things up with Russell Westbrook's contract. That at least was not more likely than not. It was a possibility. And Durant, when he finally did address the issue yesterday or 2 days ago, mentioned how he might just need to be selfish, a little bit more selfish than that, that he loves Westbrook, but just a little bit more selfish than that. Is that Game 6 and 7 talking there, or do you think when July 1 comes around, he will go ahead and just stay put?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, Rich. I'm not great at predicting these things.
Sure.
I think in his mind, he's got a lot to think through. I think for Durant, he's got to now process how close he thinks that team is, and does he think from where they were in the regular season to where all of a sudden they ended up after beating San Antonio and almost being up 3-1 on on Golden State. I would think he thinks the gulf between him and a championship has really shrunk, and that he's got a good chance to win it there. But he's got to think that through, and all the things that are important to him. I do think, I know people want to know. I don't think he knows yet, and I think he is, I don't want to say tortured, but he's got a lot of soul searching to do about what it is he wants. And I think I said this to you last time. To me, with free agents, there's two things. It's usually they're looking for reasons to leave or they're looking for reasons to stay. And he's a guy to me that's always been looking for reasons to stay in OKC, and I think he got more of them. I believe that he's got a deeper belief now in Billy Donovan. Billy really navigated the playoffs well, and that's the measure of a coach he needs. He needs a championship-level coach, and Billy got better and better. The only way to get better coaching the NBA is to coach in the NBA, and Billy did that this year, got better all year long. That certainly checks off a box for him. And, again, if he does the one-year deal, he matches himself up with Westbrook next year, and then he doesn't have to be the bad guy and leave right now. Then there's sort of a shared burden next year where if Kevin doesn't have to be I don't know, he's not a villain if he leaves. I don't mean it that way, but
sure,
it might be easier just to punt it. But he's got no shortage of suitors. Anybody who wants him or he wants can go get the salary cap space to sign him, but then he's got to look and say, is that team a championship contender? Because I think that's the only criteria, or that's at the top of his criteria. Can I find a place where I can go and start winning championships right away? And by using that criteria, you can cross a lot of potential teams off this.
And on your site, The Vertical with Woj, right now, there's a mock draft down the left side of the page that has Ingram over Simmons. Is that your reading of the tea leaves right now as we're getting set for the NBA Finals for the draft?
Well, I think as we update that, it's going to start. I think it's teetering back to Simmons with Philadelphia. I think they're starting to, grow more comfortable with the idea of Simmons at 1. He's there's history there with Brett Brown, the Sixers coach, who has been around Simmons a lot with the Australian national team. He used to coach the Australian team and has known him for several years and knows a lot about him, and I think that helps with their decision-making process. But I think, I think there's more of a lean toward Simmons, and I think that'll be updated as our mock draft gets updated on the site.
And is it more smoke than fire, this whole conversation that Okafor and Noel might be on the block for the Sixers?
No, I think that's real. I think last year Brett Brown really made he didn't hide the fact that he really questioned whether they could play together, and I think they showed on the court they just don't fit together. And so I think Philadelphia is very open to if they can find a package that moves one of those two players, and then they make a commitment to go with whether it's Okafor or Noel. I think they're gauging the market, seeing what teams are willing to offer for those two players, and then seeing if there's a deal out there that'll make sense for them.
And there's a player I used to recall named Embiid. It's sort of in the recesses of my mind, Adrian. Is it possible that he actually does suit up for the Sixers?
That's their plan. That's their plan this year, Rich. I watched Joel Embiid work out before he got injured between Kansas and his draft 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I watched him a couple days in the gym. He blew me away. He is and players that I know who've been in the gym with him and people who've watched him when he's healthier. He's really, really talented. They're hopeful that the last foot surgery secured the foot, and now he's ready to move toward, finally making his debut this year.
Yeah, and one of the other great things about your site are the podcasts. You've got one, and how'd you get Redick to do one? What's your connection there with because J.J. Redick's podcast is very entertaining, and his guests
are tremendous.
Great too.
No, his podcasts are tremendous. People from, whether it's teammates, former coaches, Stan Van Gundy, or people from other walks of entertainment. His agent, Greg Lawrence, had the idea, and we were talking, and I thought he'd be great, and he's exceeded all of my expectations. He's a superstar at that. I know one thing for sure. I don't shoot as well as he does podcasts. That's a fact.
Well, don't get in a game of horse with him. That's all, man. But you knew that anyway. Hey, thanks again for calling in the show. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And again, your site on Yahoo, The Vertical with Woj, is fantastic. Enjoy the finals.
Rich, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Always, you bet. That's Adrian Wojnarowski.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.